Hello, my friend, and welcome to this end of year reflection. New you, new year, or new me, new year. How do we relate to that if we want to stay on the path of self-remembrance or self-rediscovery rather than in creating a new persona of ourselves? That's the topic I'd like to invite for this episode. And if you're new to my channel, then warmly welcome. My name is Josephine, and this is a space where all of you is welcome. You don't need to pretend to be anything that you are. There's no demand on changing anything. It's an invitation to curiosity, honesty about our limitations, our resources, our challenges, how we see the world. A sharing in truth. And if you're a regular viewer, then warmly welcome back. Today, I'm having some challenges with the sun, actually, because this is Scandinavia, northern part of Europe, and the sun doesn't go very high this time of year. So it's basically shining straight into my living room. So if the light comes and goes during this episode, I'm gonna blame the angle of the earth. Or not blame it, but explain it away by that. Yes. Glad to have you joining in. So maybe this cultural shift in inviting in a clear-sightedness or an evaluation of where our life is going could also be seen as an invitation for truth. Maybe a New Year's resolution of change doesn't have to be in terms of discarding the old in sense of changing ourselves, but rather undressing ourselves, removing layers and protection and armor that isn't actually part of ourselves, that isn't actually supportive to living our truth, living the fullness that we are. Many of us growing up in this society has had to shield ourselves one way or another. And children do this usually very well. Belonging is much more important than authenticity, than being yourself. And from my perspective, I don't necessarily see that as an error. That's a strength. That's like the organism's capacity for survival. We adapt to what the environment thinks is suitable. If the world doesn't invite loud playfulness, it doesn't encourage honesty, it does not welcome tears of sadness, our body-mind adapt to that. It keeps it hidden. But what was once adaptive patterns to make us fit in, to make us safe, is holding us back when belonging no longer trumps. It's not longer more valuable than authenticity. Once we realize, or once we open up to the possibility that we are already whole and complete, we don't need the outside world to validate that we're valuable, that we're lovable, that we belong. We can reshape how we interact with it. We no longer come as beggars, asking for the world to give us what we lack. We can come from abundance. And this isn't a belief to be put on top of a feeling of lack. It's the opposite. It's going into the lack. It's discovering this seemingly whole or flaw or brokenness and realize if we're actually broken or if that's just an illusion, something we once needed to keep us safe. And I guess you already have a hunch of where I think the truth is. And that is that we're not broken. We are the source of love, the source of creativity, the source of belonging, of laughter, of passion, of joy. That's our essence. We can never lose it. It cannot break. It's what we are. But that's not much use to know that. Well, it is, but it's not. Knowing that or believing in that isn't the same thing as actually experiencing it. Once it becomes our lived experience, it is a tremendous resource. It's reshaping how we interact with the world and ourselves. And maybe this idea of new year, new me is an invitation to explore that, to actually go to those fragile places that I think are my flaws, is my limitations, and study them. Hold them, not shun away from them. And the beauty in this is that we don't have to do it. It's not a binary thing. We don't have to do all or nothing. We can approach them slowly, touch them a little bit, just acknowledge that they're there. We don't have to dive head straight into them if we don't feel comfortable with that. That's the beauty, at least I find that's the beauty of being honest with ourselves, is that we can also be honest with our limitations. I can see that part of me is fearful of being seen, of showing myself, because I don't trust that I'm valuable enough to do that, or I don't trust that I will feel like I belong if I do. I can see the fear. I can acknowledge my doubt that maybe it's not correct. And I can also acknowledge the fact that right now, I don't feel like I have the resources to look at that. That takes courage as well. It's not only courage in forcing ourselves to go places that we're not ready to go. Actually, just hearing myself say this, there's a relaxation in my body. Because sometimes spiritual growth or personal development or self-inquiry comes with this anticipation that we need to force ourselves. But we don't, actually. Unless we want to, we can. Notice what happens in your body at this suggestion or listening to this. This suggestion that there's a place where you can see your all that is alive in you without having to change it instantly. Acknowledging something is not the same as forcing you to go there to feel it instantly. However, what usually happens though, is that once we start to see things, maybe we see it once and twice, and then we start to see it popping up every now and then. And the more comfortable we get with naming it, with acknowledge its existence, it becomes less frightening. We can take one step closer to it, and then two steps, and then all of a sudden there's a pull towards actually exploring it. Going deep into what is this fear actually about? What is the threat behind it? Because it's not uncommon that we have fears. And as soon as this fear pops up, we shun away. We distract ourselves. We might go into alcohol, binge eating, scrolling on the phone, watching a spiritual podcast, anything to distract us away from that fear, because the threat on its own is so daunting to us, but we actually don't know what it's threatening. And to the mind, this might sound ridiculous almost. Like, I'm an adult person. I wouldn't be scared of something I don't even understand. But once we stay with ourselves, or at least this is my experience, I realize that I have been controlled by so much fear inside me without actually knowing what's at stake. What am I afraid of losing? And what price am I willing to pay to avoid this fear? Usually the ratio is not a rational trade-off. It just happens so automatic. It's almost like it's on autopilot. And I keep coming back. I have so many episodes that's devoted to curiosity and truth, or honesty. And the reason for that, I think, it's because those are such cornerstones in discovering who we are, in realizing what this life is actually about. Because without curiosity, we don't go looking. And without honesty, we're not actually seeing what we're looking at. And the thing is that it's easy to talk about honesty and curiosity, but usually we want to block it off and say, like, in this part of life, I am honest. But when it comes to my limitations, or when it comes to seeing my actual fear, my avoidance mechanisms, seeing how I show up in relationships, how I nurture myself, what I'm trying to achieve, why am I being polite in this interaction? Is it coming from love? Or is it coming from me being afraid of showing my power? Or is it coming from me being afraid of rejection? Where is the niceness actually coming from? Maybe those areas are not so, we don't want to be honest there. But that's the thing, the more we actually, even if we invite honesty in just this little quarter of our life, it has a tendency to outgrow that, because honesty doesn't like to be limited. And curiosity on top, or like combined in this honesty mix, it will spread out over our whole lives. And for me, at least, there was a time in my life where I thought that I was, this was in my late teens, I think, just early 20s, where I thought that I was a pretty sane person having my shenanigans together. And that has completely shattered. Like, there are so many different voices and contractions and fears and longings and old patterns of defense that if I don't see them, they control my life. I am completely, there are the reels and I'm just following along. And starting to see them can be a bit startling, actually, because you realize that you're not as kept together as you once thought. And actually, I even start to, obviously, I don't know. Maybe some people are completely rational on the inside. But people who say they are, sometimes I doubt if they've even looked, because it's easy to put up a show of saying, or like put up a show for other people of saying that I'm rational, I take responsibility for myself and for my actions, and I have no problem being who I am. And that's easy to say, but once you actually start looking, that's rarely the case for most of us. At least that's what I'd like to suggest from talking to friends and clients, and mainly looking at myself, actually. And the thing is that the more of these patterns and quirks and quite entertaining driving forces within me, it becomes easier to live. Authenticity doesn't become so frightening anymore. Because I see that underneath these, these patterns or these fears, there's so much resources. There's so much abundance. I think I need to protect myself from the world, that people can hurt me, that I need to get value from the outside. But I don't. And that's a constant rediscovering for me. I keep forgetting. I think I need to prove my worth, only to remember that I don't. I might need to prove my skills to get a certain job or a certain salary, but that is not the essence of my worth. That is not my value as life existing. And my real fear isn't an employer not seeing my skills. My real fear is actually that I don't have a worth. And once I see that that's never on the stake, there's so much freedom in that. Yes. Wondering if I got off tangent here. Maybe I did. Maybe I'm speaking as much to myself as I am to you. But I guess in recent years, I have become a little bit reluctant to New Year's resolutions and self-reflections around New Year's in particular. But I've come to realize that that is mostly because what's suggested in the tabloid papers is usually creating more facades, creating a fake version of yourself. But that's not necessarily what you have to do. You could also use it as actually peeling off layers, inviting more authenticity and more honesty with yourself, allowing yourself to be more of what you are, not have a preconceived agenda of what that person is going to show up like. And then all of a sudden, I can feel my inner, like my light is turned on again. Because nothing for me is more fascinating than being alert and curious about this moment. And actually, this moment is also happening on New Year's. And we have collectively somehow understood the benefit of looking at ourselves, seeing what holds us back. It's just whether we want to choose a solution that means altering ourselves even more, putting on more limitations, more rigidity, more tension, more pretending to show up as someone, or if we choose the way of putting down baggage, undressing, becoming more of ourselves, our true selves. Yes. Maybe the phrasing should be new year, more you, or more me. And let that version be whatever version we find. If we want to. Yes. What's your relationship with this time of year or this societal invitation to rediscover ourselves? Not necessarily reshape ourselves or reinvent ourselves, but rediscover ourselves. The comment section is all yours if you feel like it touched something inside you or if you have any reflections. Thank you for spending this moment with me, and I wish you a happy new year. See you in 2026.